Captain Jack Reynolds stood frozen before the massive screen. The asteroid glowed red on the display, a deadly dot moving closer to Earth with each passing second. At almost 30 kilometers wide, it was larger than anything humans had ever faced. His fists clenched as he listened to the alien standing beside him. "There is nothing that can be done," said Ambassador Thax. The tall, blue-skinned alien spoke with a voice that showed no emotion. "Our calculations are perfect. Impact will occur in 90 days. The probability of total extinction for Earth species is 99.8%. Reynolds looked around the emergency meeting room. 20 world leaders sat in shocked silence. Some had their heads in their hands. Others stared blankly at the screens showing the massive rock hurtling toward them through space. "You're the most advanced species in the galaxy," Reynolds finally said. "You're telling me you can't help us stop this?" Thax tilted his large head. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Reynolds had learned meant something like pity. "Captain, your species is young. You must understand that some natural events cannot be prevented. Not even by us." Thax touched a device on his wrist, and a new image appeared. "The Galactic Council has agreed to offer sanctuary. We can transport 10,000 humans to safe worlds." The room erupted. 10,000. Out of 8 billion. The President of India stood up, her voice shaking. "This is an insult," shouted another leader. Thax remained calm. "We have limited resources for emergency evacuations. We must select the best examples of your species. The most intelligent, the most adaptable, those who will contribute to galactic civilization." Reynolds felt sick. The aliens had arrived 5 years ago, bringing advanced technology and promises of friendship. Humans had welcomed them, changing laws and customs to join the galactic community. Now, when Earth needed them most, they offered to save less than 1 in a million people. "The selection process begins tomorrow," Thax continued. "Council ships will land in 12 major cities. Your governments must maintain order during the process." As the meeting broke down into arguments, Reynolds slipped out. In the hallway, his secure phone buzzed. The message was short. "Need to meet. I have something. Emily." 3 hours later, Reynolds found himself driving through pouring rain to a research complex hidden in the Rocky Mountains. The news about the asteroid had leaked. Already, riots had broken out in major cities. The roads were strangely empty, everyone glued to their screens at home or making desperate plans. At the security gate, a guard checked his ID 3 times before letting him through. The world was breaking down, and everyone knew it. Dr. Emily Dawson met him in an underground lab filled with equipment he didn't recognize. Her red hair was tied back messily, and dark circles showed under her eyes. She hadn't slept in days. "They're lying," she said without greeting him. "Or at least, they're not telling the whole truth." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "The aliens? About what?" "About the asteroid. About what's possible." Emily led him to a cluttered desk covered with calculations and diagrams. "Jack, we can stop it. It's not impossible." Reynolds felt a flicker of hope, quickly pushed down. "Emily, if the council says it can't be done, the council doesn't know everything." Her fist hit the table. "Or worse, they do know, but they're not helping. Either way, I'm not giving up without trying." She pointed to a complex diagram. 3 years ago, my team started developing this on paper. We called it Project Shield. It uses gravitational manipulation to create a lens, a way to bend space itself around large objects. Reynolds frowned. "Like they're faster-than-light drives." "Similar principles, but applied differently." When the council arrived, they dismissed our work, said it was physically impossible according to their understanding of the universe. Emily's eyes gleamed with determination. "But we kept working in secret. And last month, we had a breakthrough." She led him to a sealed chamber. Inside, through thick glass, Reynolds saw a small device surrounded by instruments. "Watch this." Emily pressed a button. The device hummed to life. Above it, A baseball-sized rock hovered, then slowly moved to the left without anything touching it. "You're controlling gravity," Reynolds whispered. "On a tiny scale, yes. The problem is power. To affect something as big as the asteroid, we'd need more energy than all of Earth's power plants combined." She turned to face him. "But it's possible. The physics works." Reynolds ran a hand through his short black hair. "Even if you're right, how could we possibly build something that big in 90 days? Emily smiled grimly. "That's where you come in. I need someone with military authority, someone the government trusts. We need to commandeer every industrial resource left on the planet." "You're talking about the biggest engineering project in human history during a global panic." "Yes." Her eyes didn't waver. "While the rich and powerful fight for spots on the evacuation ships, we build our own solution. It's that or extinction." Reynolds thought about Thax's cold eyes, the casual way he had announced the end of human civilization, the way the Council had already written off humanity, offering to save just a tiny sample like specimens in a zoo. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Emily handed him a tablet with a list of names. "These are the best engineers, physicists, and builders on Earth. Many are already being approached for evacuation. We need them here instead." Reynolds scanned the list. "Some of these people won't come willingly." "Then convince them. Remind them what's at stake." Emily's voice hardened. "Every person who boards those alien ships is giving up on Earth." As if on cue, Reynolds' phone buzzed with alerts. The first Council evacuation ships had landed in New York, Beijing, and London. Videos showed crowds pressing against barriers, trying to reach the sleek silver craft. In some cities, security forces were already using water cannons to control riots. "We have less time than we thought," Reynolds said, showing her the screen. "Once people realize those ships are their only hope, society will collapse." Emily took a deep breath. "Then we work fast. The aliens said no one could stop this asteroid. Humans are going to prove them wrong." Reynolds nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. "I'll start making calls." "But Emily," he hesitated, "if this fails, we're giving up guaranteed spots on those evacuation ships." "I know." She looked back at her small gravity device. "But I'd rather die trying to save everyone than live knowing I abandoned humanity." Reynolds thought of Thax's smug certainty, the aliens' casual dismissal of human ingenuity. Something hardened inside him. "Let's get to work," he said. Outside, the rain kept falling. Soon, it would be the least of Earth's problems. 58 days until impact. The world was falling apart. Jack Reynolds looked out the helicopter window at the burning city below. Chicago had descended into chaos 3 days ago, when food deliveries stopped. Now smoke rose from dozens of buildings. The Council's evacuation ship hovered above the downtown area, its smooth silver surface reflecting the fires below. "We're approaching the factory," the pilot shouted over the noise. Reynolds nodded. Next to him, Tom Wilson, a burly engineer with a thick beard, clutched his seat as the helicopter swung around. "Are you sure these people will help us?" Wilson asked. "They don't have much choice," Reynolds replied. "Their names aren't on the Council's evacuation list." The helicopter landed in a cleared area beside a large manufacturing plant. Armed soldiers immediately surrounded them, providing protection from the desperate crowds that gathered anywhere a helicopter landed these days. Inside the factory, Reynolds found the manager, a thin man named Davis, who led them to his office. "Captain, with all due respect, you're asking the impossible," Davis said after hearing Reynolds' request. "You want us to retool our entire factory to make these gravity lens components in less than a month." Reynolds placed a tablet on the desk. "These are the designs. Dr. Dawson has simplified them as much as possible. But the precision required can be achieved with your equipment." Wilson cut in. "I've studied your facility. You make satellite parts, which require similar precision." Davis looked uncertain. "Even if we could, most of my workers have fled. They're trying to reach evacuation points or be with their families. Reynolds leaned forward. What about you, Davis? Why are you still here? The man looked down. My family. We're not on any lists. Not important enough. Nobody is important enough in the aliens' eyes, Reynolds said quietly. But we can save everyone. All of Earth, not just the chosen few. Davis picked up the tablet, studied the designs. You really believe this will work? I do, Reynolds said with more confidence than he felt. After a moment, Davis nodded. I'll call every worker who's still in the area. We'll start tonight. On the other side of the world, Emily Dawson stood in a massive warehouse that had been converted into Project SHIELD's headquarters. Hundreds of people worked at computer stations or over large technical drawings. The place hummed with desperate energy. Her assistant, a young physicist named Mark, approached with a tablet. Dr. Dawson, we have reports from 16 factories now. Production has started at 12 of them. Emily nodded tiredly. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. What about the orbital components? She asked. That's more complicated. Mark swiped to a different screen. The space agencies are in disarray. Half their staff have left to join the evacuation lines. And the Council is watching all rocket launches carefully. Emily frowned. They suspect something. Maybe. Ambassador Thax has requested a meeting with you tomorrow. Emily felt a chill. The Council had eyes everywhere. They had presented themselves as benevolent advisors to humanity, but their actions since the asteroid's discovery revealed a different attitude. They saw humans as lesser beings, not worth the effort of a full rescue. I'll meet him, she said, but we need those orbital platforms. Without them, the gravity lens won't have enough range to affect the asteroid. Mark hesitated. There's one option we haven't considered. The Council left several maintenance platforms in orbit for their ships. If we could, repurpose them. You mean steal alien technology? Mark shrugged. They're letting almost all of humanity die. I'd say we're entitled. Emily smiled grimly. Get me everything you can find about those platforms. And call Reynolds. We'll need his people for this. Ambassador Thax stood at the viewing window of his ship, looking down at Earth. Behind him, his assistant Rin monitored communications. The humans are up to something, Thax said. Their activity doesn't match our predictive models for a species facing extinction. Perhaps it is their way of coping, Rin suggested. Denial is common in primitive species. No, Thax's 4 eyes narrowed. They're building something. Coordinating globally despite their collapsing governments. What could they possibly build that would help? Our science concluded. Our science concluded what we told them it concluded, Thax interrupted. The Council's policy is clear. Species facing extinction-level events must save themselves or perish. It is how we determine who deserves to join galactic civilization. Urin moved uncomfortably. Some members of the observation team have expressed concern about this policy. The humans show great potential. Potential is meaningless without achievement, Thax said sharply. Every current Council race saved themselves from at least one extinction threat. It is the ultimate test. He turned from the window. Increase surveillance on all their manufacturing centers and launch facilities, and schedule a meeting with their scientist. This Dr. Dawson. I wish to assess their progress myself. Reynolds stood on the roof of the Chicago factory, watching as trucks loaded with freshly manufactured components pulled away under military escort. His phone buzzed. Emily calling. We have a problem, she said without greeting. The aliens are watching us. Thax wants to meet with me tomorrow. Reynolds frowned. He suspects. Yes. And worse, we need their orbital platforms for the final assembly. We can't launch enough of our own in time. Reynolds thought for a moment. So we need to distract them while stealing their technology. Basically, yes. Even through the phone, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I'll handle Thax, Reynolds said. You focus on the technical problems. There's something else, Emily added. The first test of the gravity lens prototype failed. We couldn't generate a strong enough field. Reynolds closed his eyes. 30 days until impact, and their only hope wasn't working. "What do we need?" he asked. "More power. Much more than we calculated." Reynolds looked up at the sky, where the stars were barely visible through the smoke rising from the city. Somewhere up there, the asteroid continued its approach, unstoppable and uncaring. "We'll find it," he promised, "whatever it takes." As he ended the call, an explosion rocked the city center. The desperate crowds had breached the perimeter around the council's evacuation ship. Even from miles away, Reynolds could see the ship's defense systems activating, pushing people back with waves of invisible force. 10,000 saved out of billions. The council's idea of mercy. "We proved them wrong," Reynolds whispered to himself, "or we all die trying." 21 days until impact. The sky had changed. Emily Dawson stepped outside the mountain facility for the first time in days. She looked up and saw it, a faint dot visible even in daylight. The asteroid. Now close enough to see with the naked eye, it hung in the sky like a terrible star, a reminder of the deadline they faced. She took a deep breath of fresh air, then turned as she heard footsteps. Jack Reynolds approached, looking as tired as she felt. "The meeting with Thax is set for noon," he said. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be to lie to an alien who can probably detect my heartbeat. You won't be alone. I'll be there." She gave him a grateful smile. In these 3 weeks of constant work and pressure, they had grown close, both carrying the weight of an impossible task. "The latest report from the factories isn't good," she said, changing the subject. 5 more have stopped production. The workers are leaving to be with their families or trying to reach evacuation points. Reynolds grimaced. "Can we finish with what we have?" "Maybe, if the test today works." She checked her watch. "We should get back inside. The team is preparing now." They walked back into the facility, passing armed guards. Security had been increased as more people learned about Project SHIELD. Some saw it as humanity's last hope. Others thought it was a waste of resources better spent on evacuation efforts. In the main lab, a crowd had gathered around a testing chamber. Inside was the latest prototype of the gravity lens, a complex array of rings and panels surrounding the glowing core. Mark, Emily's assistant, approached with a tablet. "We're ready, Dr. Dawson. Full power in 5 minutes." Emily nodded and addressed the room. "This is our most critical test. If we can deflect the target by even 1 degree, we know the principle works. We just need to scale it up." The room fell silent as technicians made final adjustments. The prototype hummed to life, the core glowing brighter. "Power at 60%, someone called out. 70, 80. A warning light began to flash. The prototype vibrated, the humming growing louder. "Power fluctuating," a technician shouted. "Core temperature rising too fast." Emily rushed to a control panel. "Stabilize the input. Route power through the secondary systems." The humming turned to a high-pitched whine. Sparks flew from one of the control panels. "Everyone down," Reynolds shouted, pulling Emily away from the controls. With a deafening bang, the prototype exploded. Safety shields contained most of the blast, but smoke filled the room and alarms blared. When the emergency systems cleared the air, they saw the damage. The prototype was destroyed. Worse, 3 technicians lay injured where shrapnel had broken through the shields. "Get medical help," Reynolds ordered as people rushed to the wounded. Emily stood frozen, staring at the ruined device. Weeks of work destroyed in seconds, and people hurt because of her design. "It's my fault," she whispered. "I pushed too hard. Tried to do too much too fast." Reynolds put a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't over. We'll rebuild." She turned to him, eyes hollow with exhaustion and despair. "With what? We lost our best power regulator. And the main core design was flawed. We adapt. We fix it." His voice was firm. "Remember what's at stake." Before she could respond, Mark approached looking even more worried. "Dr. Dawson, we have another problem. The Council's ships are scanning all our facilities, and 3 countries have just announced they're pulling out of the project." "Which ones?" Reynolds asked sharply. "Russia, Brazil, and Japan. They're redirecting all resources to evacuation efforts." Emily felt the world crumbling around her. "Without their manufacturing capacity, we can't complete the orbital components." Reynolds checked his watch. "We still have the meeting with Thax. Maybe we can learn something useful." Emily nodded, trying to push away her despair. "Let's go face the alien." Ambassador Thax's temporary office was in what had once been the United Nations building in New York. Half the city was abandoned now, with evacuation ships taking people daily. Only the wealthy and powerful remained, hoping to secure spots on the final ships. Thax sat behind a large desk, his 4 eyes watching as Emily and Reynolds entered. 2 silent alien guards stood nearby. "Dr. Dawson." "Captain Reynolds." Thax's voice was smooth and emotionless. "Thank you for making time in your busy schedule." "What do you want, Ambassador?" Reynolds asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Thax's upper eyes blinked slowly, direct as always. "Very well. The Council has noticed unusual activity at manufacturing facilities around your world. Activity that doesn't fit the expected pattern for a species preparing for evacuation." Emily kept her face neutral. "We're trying to save as many cultural artifacts as possible. For the historical record, cultural artifacts require military guards and secret shipments." Thax made a sound like dry leaves rustling. An alien laugh. "Please, Doctor, don't insult my intelligence." He touched a device on his desk, and a hologram appeared showing one of their factories. Inside, workers assembled components of the gravity lens. "You're building something," Thax said. "Something you believe might save your planet." Reynolds stepped forward. "And if we are, shouldn't you be helping us? The Council's policy is clear. Each species must overcome extinction events through their own efforts." "Then why offer evacuation at all?" Emily demanded. Thax's 4 eyes focused on her. "Think of it as collecting specimens. The Council has followed this practice for millennia. Those species who save themselves join as equals. Those who cannot contribute their genetic diversity before extinction." The cold truth of their situation hit Emily like a physical blow. The aliens had never intended to save humanity as a civilization. Just samples, like animals for a zoo. "You knew there was a solution all along," Reynolds said, voice tight with anger. "You could have helped us stop the asteroid." "We could have," Thax agreed calmly. "But then we would never know if humans deserve to survive." Emily felt rage building inside her. "So you watch civilizations die as a test. How many have you let perish this way?" "Many," Thax said simply. "And a few have surprised us. Perhaps you will too, though I calculate the probability as extremely low." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Your project, whatever it is, will fail. But the Council appreciates your species' determination. It is admirable, if futile." As they left the building, Emily was shaking with anger. They'd been playing God with entire worlds, deciding who lives and who dies. Reynolds nodded grimly. "And now we know the truth. No help is coming." He looked at her. "It's just us." Emily's mind raced through possibilities. The prototype failed because we couldn't contain the power. But what if? She stopped, a new idea forming. "What?" Reynolds asked. "The Council ships. They must have massive power systems. If we could study one." Reynolds caught her meaning. "You want to steal alien technology from under their noses." Emily smiled for the first time in days. "They said no one could build a defense system. Let's prove them wrong, using their own technology against them." High above, the asteroid grew ever closer as humanity reached its breaking point. 7 days until impact. The asteroid filled the night sky now, a glowing orb of death visible to everyone on Earth. In the control room of what had once been NASA's launch facility in Florida, Jack Reynolds watched as hundreds of screens showed the largest space operation in human history unfolding. Shuttles, cargo ships, and hastily modified passenger planes carried components into orbit. Status report. He called out to the room of tired operators. A young woman with short black hair looked up from her station. 70% of shield components are in position, Captain. The main gravity lens ring is still being assembled. Estimated completion time is 36 hours. Reynolds nodded. It wasn't fast enough, but it was all they had. Outside, the world had descended into a strange calm. The riots had mostly stopped. People were either huddled with loved ones or watching the sky in silent fear. The council's evacuation was nearly complete. 10,000 humans chosen to survive while billions waited for death. The door opened and Emily walked in. She looked different now, harder, more determined. The past weeks had changed them all. The alien power core is ready, she announced. We've adapted it to our systems. It should provide 3 times the energy we calculated we'd need. A cheer went up from the tired workers. After their meeting with Thax, Emily had led a daring raid on one of the council's maintenance platforms. They had stolen a backup power core, technology centuries beyond human understanding. But Emily and her team had worked nonstop to make it compatible with S.H.I.E.L.D. Any reaction from the council? Reynolds asked quietly. Emily's mouth tightened. Thax sent a message. He said our theft of council property violates galactic law. But they're not stopping us. Of course not. They want to see if we can actually do it. They're still watching us like we're lab rats. Emily's voice was bitter. Their main ships left orbit this morning, moved to a safe observation distance. Reynolds wasn't surprised. The council ships had been departing Earth for days, taking their chosen humans and retreating to watch the show from a distance. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the control room. All eyes turned to the main screen. Solar flare detected, shouted an operator. Massive electromagnetic pulse heading toward Earth's orbit. Reynolds felt his heart sink. Time to impact. Less than 1 hour. It'll hit right in the middle of our assembly area. Emily rushed to a control panel. The components aren't shielded yet. We'll lose everything in orbit. Reynolds thought quickly. Can we move the components behind Earth? Use the planet as a shield? Not enough time, Emily said. Most of the pieces don't have maneuvering capability yet. The room fell silent as the reality sank in. Weeks of desperate work, about to be destroyed by bad luck. By the uncaring universe. There's one option, said a quiet voice. Reynolds turned to see Mark, Emily's assistant. The maintenance shuttle has heavy shielding. If someone flies it into position between the solar flare and the main components, they'd be fried by the radiation, Emily finished. I'll do it, Reynolds said immediately. Emily grabbed his arm. Jack, no. We need you here. This is what I do, Emily. Lead from the front. He looked around the room at the team they'd assembled. Keep building. If I can save the components, you finish the job. Without waiting for arguments, he headed for the door. Emily followed him into the hallway. There has to be another way, she said desperately. There isn't time to find one. He stopped and turned to her. Emily, if this doesn't work, if SHI-E-L-D fails, the council ships will return for a final evacuation. Your name is on their list. She looked shocked. How do you know that? I made sure of it. Thax owed me a favor. He didn't mention what it had cost him. Promise me you'll go if it comes to that. Humanity will need brilliant minds like yours to start over. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I won't give up on Earth. Not while there's still a chance. Reynolds nodded. Neither will I. 20 minutes later, Reynolds piloted the maintenance shuttle into low Earth orbit. Through the window, he could see the pieces of S.H.I.E.L.D., a massive ring of components stretching for miles. The gravity lens was taking shape, humanity's last hope. Control, I'm in position, he reported. How long until the flare hits? "17 minutes, Captain," came the response. "The shuttle's shields will only last for about 10 minutes under that radiation." "Then I'll have to get creative," Reynolds muttered. He positioned the shuttle carefully, extending its auxiliary shields to cover the most critical components. Through the front window, he could see the first brightness of the approaching solar flare, a wall of deadly energy racing toward Earth. "Control, once the flare passes, you'll need to send recovery teams. Some components will need repairs." "Understood, Captain." The voice paused. "Jack, there's a message from Dr. Dawson." "Put her through." Emily's voice came over the comm. "Jack, we've calculated another option. If you use the shuttle's thrusters to push the main ring just 6 degrees, the Earth's magnetic field might provide enough protection." Reynolds checked his instruments. "Not enough fuel for that kind of maneuver. There's another way." Her voice was steady despite the emotion he could hear underneath. "The shuttle has emergency landing jets. If you vent the fuel in a controlled burst, it would leave me without landing capability." Reynolds understood immediately. But it might work. He began the calculations, fingers flying over the control panel. It was a desperate move, but it might save more of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s components, and that would give Earth a better chance. "Beginning maneuver," he reported. "Venting landing fuel now." The shuttle shuddered as jets of fuel fired from its underside, pushing the massive ring of components slowly but surely into a new position. Reynolds watched the fuel gauge drop to 0. "No way home now." "Components moving into position," he said. "Control, how's it look?" "Better, Captain. Earth's magnetosphere should shield about 60% of the array now." "Not perfect, but better than nothing." Reynolds watched as the brightness grew outside his window. The flare was almost upon them. "Shuttle shields failing," he reported as warnings flashed across his controls. The temperature in the cabin began to rise. "I'm going to try to reach the emergency shelter on the far side of the ring." "Good luck, Captain," Control replied. As the radiation hit, system after system in the shuttle began to fail. Reynolds fought to keep the craft on course, sweat pouring down his face from the heat. The emergency shelter, a small reinforced chamber built for orbital workers, was just visible in the distance. With the last of the shuttle's power, he aimed for the small docking port and fired the emergency thrusters. "Control, I'm making my approach," he said, though he wasn't sure if communications were still working. "Tell Emily. Tell her to finish the job." The solar flare engulfed the shuttle in blinding light as Reynolds made his final approach. Back on Earth, screens in the control room went white, then black as the electromagnetic pulse disrupted communications. Emily stood frozen, staring at the place where Reynolds' life signs had been moments before. "Dr. Dawson," Mark said gently, "orbital cameras will be back online in about 20 minutes. We'll know then." Emily nodded numbly. And Shailed. "Preliminary data shows most components survived. We can still do this." She took a deep breath and turned to face the room of waiting faces. They all looked to her now. "Then let's get back to work," she said. "We have a planet to save." Above them, the asteroid continued its approach, now just days away from impact. One day until impact, the asteroid dominated the sky now, a massive rock slowly growing larger with each passing hour. People around the world watched it with a mixture of terror and strange fascination. The end of the world visible to all. In the control center, Emily Dawson hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the main screen showing S.H.I.E.L.D. status. The massive structure was finally complete, a ring of interconnected platforms surrounding a central core, all floating in space between Earth and the approaching asteroid. "Final systems check complete," Mark announced. "All components are responding." Emily nodded. After the solar flare, they had lost nearly 30% of the components. Repair teams had worked nonstop, fixing what they could, replacing what they couldn't. And they had found Jack Reynolds, barely alive in the emergency shelter. He was in the medical bay now, recovering from severe radiation exposure. power systems?" she asked. "The alien core is stable. Output at 98%. Around the room, technicians and scientists worked at their stations. They were the last team. Everyone else had been evacuated to underground shelters. If HFY failed, they would have front-row seats to the end of the world." The door opened, and Emily turned to see Reynolds being wheeled in by a nurse. His skin was pale and covered with radiation burns, but his eyes were alert. "You should be resting," Emily said, moving to his side. "Not going to miss the big show," he replied, his voice weak but determined. "How are we looking?" "Ready as we'll ever be. The gravitational lens is stable. If our calculations are correct, we only need to shift the asteroid's path by a few degrees to miss Earth." Reynolds looked up at the main screen. "And if we're wrong?" Emily didn't answer. They both knew what would happen. A technician called out from a monitoring station. "Dr. Dawson, we're detecting Council ships returning to Earth orbit. 3 vessels, holding position just outside our operational area." "They've come to watch," Reynolds said bitterly, "to see if the lab rats pass their test." Emily turned to address the room. "Ignore them. Focus on your tasks. Final countdown begins in 30 minutes. As the team made last preparations, Emily knelt beside Reynolds' wheelchair. "Jack, there's something you should know. The calculations, they're not as certain as I've let on. The asteroid is so massive that even with the alien power core, we might not generate a strong enough gravitational field." Reynolds nodded. "You have a backup plan." It wasn't a question. He knew her too well now. "Yes, but it's dangerous." She lowered her voice. "We've modified some nuclear missiles. If the gravity lens can start moving the asteroid but needs more force, the missiles could provide it. Using nukes in space, the Council specifically warned against that." "I know, but it's our planet, not theirs." Her eyes were hard. "The missiles are ready to launch on my command." Reynolds took her hand. "Do whatever it takes. Save our world." The final countdown began. Around the world, people gathered around screens or looked up at the sky. In the Council ships, Ambassador Thax and other aliens watched with clinical interest, recording everything for their archives. "Powering up shield," Mark announced. 20%, 40%. The lights in the control center dimmed as power was diverted to the orbital platform. On screens, they could see the massive ring beginning to glow with energy. 60%, 80%, full power achieved. Emily stepped forward. "Activate the gravity lens." With a command, the greatest machine humans had ever built came to life. In space, the ring of platforms focused their energy on a single point, creating a powerful gravitational distortion aimed at the approaching asteroid. For long, tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The asteroid continued its approach, filling more and more of the sky. No effect. Someone called out in dismay. "Give it time," Emily said, though her heart was sinking. "The gravitational force needs to build." More minutes passed. Sweat beaded on foreheads as everyone in the room watched the screens. The asteroid showed no signs of changing course. "Dr. Dawson," Mark said quietly, "we need to make a decision about the missiles. Launch window closing in 5 minutes. Emily hesitated, looking at the data streaming across her screens. The gravity lens was working as designed, but the asteroid was simply too massive, too fast. "Prepare missiles for launch," she ordered. Reynolds reached for her hand again. "Emily, wait. Look." He pointed to one of the monitoring screens. The asteroid's trajectory line showed the slightest curve, barely noticeable, but there. "It's working," Mark exclaimed. "The gravity lens is affecting it." Emily studied the data. "It's not enough. At this rate, it will still hit us." "Launch the missiles," Reynolds said firmly. "Give it everything we've got." Emily gave the command. Around the world, nuclear silos opened. Missiles streaked upward, carrying humanity's most destructive weapons toward space. On the Council ships, alarms sounded. The humans are launching nuclear weapons, Lorin reported to Ambassador Thax. Against all guidelines. Thax's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Interesting. They choose to break rules rather than accept defeat. Should we intervene? No. Let us see what happens. The missiles reached space, soaring toward the asteroid that now filled half the sky. One by one, they impacted against its surface, creating massive explosions that were visible even from Earth. In the control center, everyone held their breath as new data came in. Asteroid fragmenting, Mark shouted, breaking into multiple pieces. Emily's heart raced. Recalculate trajectories for all fragments. The room erupted in frantic activity as people worked to determine whether they had saved Earth or doomed it in a different way. Largest fragment still on collision course, someone called out. Impact in Western Pacific expected. 3 medium fragments will enter atmosphere over Asia and Europe. Emily turned to the main controls. Divert all remaining power to the gravity lens. Focus on the largest fragment. The lights went out completely now, emergency systems barely providing enough illumination to see. On screens, they watched as Shield glowed brighter than ever, pouring all its energy into one final push against the asteroid's largest piece. Come on, Emily whispered. Just a little more. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, a shout from one of the monitoring stations. Trajectory shifting. The main fragment will miss Earth by less than 500 miles. A cheer erupted in the control room. On other screens, they could see the smaller fragments burning up in Earth's atmosphere, creating spectacular light shows but no devastating impacts. We did it, Reynolds said softly. We actually did it. Emily couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the largest fragment of the asteroid streak past Earth. Close enough to see with the naked eye, but no longer a threat to human existence. Around the world, people emerged from shelters, looking up at the sky in wonder as fiery trails crossed the heavens. Not the end of the world, but a new beginning. 3 days later, Ambassador Thax stood before a gathering of world leaders. His attitude had changed subtly. There was a new respect in his posture. The Council has voted, he announced. Earth is invited to join the galactic community, not as specimens, but as equals. Reynolds, still in a wheelchair but recovering, spoke up. And what changed your minds? The fact that we survived. Not just survived, Thax replied. You succeeded where many would have failed. And then you did something unexpected. He turned to Emily. You shared your technology. Emily had sent the complete plans for Shield to other worlds in the Council's database, planets facing similar threats. It had been her first action after confirming Earth was safe. No species should have to face extinction alone, she said simply. Thax's upper eyes blinked, a gesture they now knew indicated approval. Perhaps we have something to learn from humans after all. Reynolds smiled at Emily as the meeting continued. Above them, pieces of the asteroid continued to burn up in the atmosphere, creating shooting stars that would be visible for weeks. They had said no one could build it. Humans had proved them wrong.